Good morning and a warm welcome to Charcha 2024. Please give another round of applause to Natuji. He is a 13th generation Nagada performer from Pushkar. Thank you. My name is Napina Sampath and I will be your host for the day. Thank you all for making the time to be here. We hope you have a productive and enjoyable experience at Charcha 2024. It is now my pleasure to invite Atul Satija, CEO of the Nudge Institute, to provide the welcome address.
Am I audible? Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to Charcha 2024. I say this with a lot of honor and pride, but also a lot of privilege that we are organizing Charcha this year with 20 plus co-hosts that you see here on the screen. And I actually welcome you on behalf of every one of the partners there and the Nudge Institute. Thank you so much for making it here and joining us today, despite the Delhi rains and the traffic and everything, braving all that. Thank you so much. We are all here today to discuss one of the most important issues, the most pressing issues facing India today, which is to make sure that every Indian has a decent job and a sustainable livelihood. The dream for an achhi naukri and a decent, sustainable, resilient livelihood is not something that everybody can hope and aspire for. And that's why we are here today. Over the last few decades, we have seen a lot of progress that India has made. We have seen our poverty rates come down from very, very high, 75, 76 years back to where we are today. But that still actually leaves a large number of people behind. For a country as large as India, that means we are leaving tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people behind that don't have dreams and aspirations to actually catch up to the growing economic curve that we all see. I remember an incident in 2015 when I was doing field service in slums and we were just about starting Nudge. I went to this KR Puram slum in Bangalore in 2015, mid or so. And I went and met this lady and I was talking to her about her life. Do they get electricity? Do they get water? And things like that. And after responding to my questions very patiently for a couple of minutes, she stopped me and said, Sir, in a very impatient tone, saying, Sir, mera chhodiye, aap mere bachchon ke liye kuch kijiye. Leave me, just think about my kids and do something for them. And as I spent some more time with her, I realized that she had given up hope for her own future and aspirations for her own dreams a while back. But she wanted to hold on to the dreams and aspirations for the next generation. And I saw that she was about giving up on those two. And she didn't want to do that. And the Nudge journey of focusing on jobs and livelihood started from there. We realized that there are a lot of people, she's not alone, who are actually hoping to have a better life and aspiration for themselves, and their parental generation has all their hopes now transferred to them. And I don't think we are doing a good job as a country to actually give them everything they need. Not just in terms of jobs, but also making them ready for actually leveraging those opportunities. Good quality education, good quality skilling, connecting them to these jobs, helping them settling into cities, so on and so forth. So it's a very important topic that we are here to discuss today and over the next few days as we spend time in Charcha. Personally, I don't think there has ever been a better time for India to actually solve its problems like this one. We have India, as a country now, we have in India one of the best physical infrastructures. The roads are there. They are actually able to connect to almost the last mile, if not the last mile. We have one of the best digital connectivities of any country in the world. Even if a Didi in a remote rural Jharkhand doesn't have internet, the people who are serving them, who are connecting them, they are actually digitally connected for sure. We have financial connectivity. People have bank accounts. And now, even if not every single bank account is active, most of them are. They have money, they get benefits directly into their bank accounts. And most importantly, and least appreciated, is the social infrastructure. India has built in the last 2 decades 11.9 million self-help groups. That's roughly 100 million women. That's roughly 500 million people connected in those families through a social fabric. Even if you discount for quality and all the other things that will be a challenge in that infrastructure, it is still an awesome start for us to build upon. So it's a huge opportunity that we can actually do very, very interesting things on. But we can't do it alone. These are humongous challenges for a country as large, as diverse as India is, and hence the need to collaborate. We all need to bring our respective strengths to the table, whether we are markets, whether we are civil society organizations and nonprofits, funders, foundations, HNIs, or communities themselves. We all need to come together, put our strengths on the table, and collectively figure out a way to take this agenda forward. The next 3 days of Charcha are about Charcha, discussions and dialogues, but that's a very small part of it. Charcha is also a lot more about how can we actually act on those ideas, that learning, those opportunities. And if we can leave Charcha with something new that we take back, that we can actually implement on the ground in a very practical way that improves the lives of those less privileged, I think it will be a successful Charcha. So I want to leave all of you with a request that let's approach the next 3 days with a sense of optimism, because there are challenges, but human will, human agenda, human agency will allow us to also do things about them. And hopefully together we can bring about change that we genuinely want to see on the ground and create livelihood opportunities for India's poor. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Atul, for setting the stage for Charcha 2024. I now invite Dr. R.S. Sharma, advisor to the Nudge, Ms. Renu Karnand, board member to the Nudge, Ms. Smita Tatewar, co-founder of Eklavya, to come up on stage. We're also delighted to have Litiya Surdidi, who's come all the way from Jharkhand. And I request all of you to come up on stage and light the lamp. Before I invite the guests for the plenary session, I have a few requests to make. Please do keep your mobile phones on silent at all times. In the attendee kit that you might have received, you will see an agenda for the 3 days of Charcha. Please do be mindful of the timings and the locations of the different sessions to make sure that you don't miss any of the sessions you do want to attend. There is a QR code printed behind the printed agenda. We request that you scan the code to give us feedback. It is a fervent appeal. Thank you. If you need any help, please do approach the volunteers who are dressed in Charcha t-shirts. They are here to help you have a seamless experience. Thank you and enjoy the 3 days. Thank you. We will now begin with the opening plenary session, Roadmap to Viksit, an Inclusive India at 100. I invite Dr. R.S. Sharma, who has served as the CEO of the National Health Authority and the National Digital Mission, to the stage. I request Mr. Amitabh Kant to join him. Mr. Kant is presently the G20 Sherpa of India during its presidency year. He was CEO of Niti Aayog and Secretary to the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion. I also welcome Ms. Arti Ahuja, who most recently led the Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India as its secretary. I invite award-winning journalist, columnist, and author, and founder and editor-in-chief of the print, Shekhar Gupta, to lead this discussion. A warm welcome to our plenary panel. I have another request to make. There is going to be a QR code that you will see on the screen up here. Please do scan the QR code to ask questions during the discussion. These will be addressed at the end of the session by the panelists. Thank you. Warm welcome. Over to you, Shekhar.
Thank you. Is there a microphone? It's okay. Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you very much. A brilliant panel, right to left. She can't escape because she's AA, Arti Ahuja, so even alphabetically she can't escape. So Arti Ahuja, she's been secretary of almost everything that you can imagine somebody running in Government of India, and it also tells you something about her versatility. She's done labor and welfare, chemicals and petrochemicals, fertilizers, health and family welfare. Amitabh Kant, who all of you know from his many avatars, currently G20 Sherpa, but I don't think anything works in this city without Amitabh's involvement. Dr. R.S. Sharma again took charge of the health mission at a time that was very challenging, and before that, the prime mover of Aadhaar. So, great panel, great discussion. We are looking at what's happened in the last 10 years, what's happened, what's worked. 10 years, why just 10 years? 10 years. And looking ahead to 2047. We know that we've had good growth. I will keep my views out of this. I keep that for Friday afternoons when I struggle for one to write. In any case, this is the panelists' session for the panelists' viewpoint. So last 20 years, India has had robust growth. What has caused this growth to happen? Is it continuity? Is it change? Have we done some things brilliantly well? Could we have done something better? One thing that has emerged over these 20 years is that growth has not generated enough jobs and has created inequality, and election after election you will find that anybody who's in the opposition says this, and in the course of time anybody who says this is successful. So we saw in 2004, Mr. Vajpayee went to the elections on the slogan of India Shining, and India had had a few quarters of good growth, and he lost power. And I remember after that, Bill Clinton had come. He had lost power. I mean, he had finished his term by then, second term. And there was a small reception at Rashtrapati Bhavan where he spoke for 5 minutes. And he said, this is a country that had 8% growth, but the government lost. That's because people who benefit from growth are much fewer than those who feel they haven't benefited sufficiently or they've got left behind. So all growth brings the first benefits to those in the best position to take advantage of the growth. The line I heard someplace was that rising tide lifts all boats, but it lifts the yachts first. So that is an issue that everybody deals with, and that's where jobs, and that's where the idea of inclusive growth comes in. In fact, the idea of inclusive growth first came in as the UPA took over in 2004, and Dr. Manmohan Singh knew that he had to do pretty much what Mr. Vajpayee had been doing, but they had to give it a different name. So that's how inclusive growth. Over the 2 decades, that inclusive growth idea has been carried forward, particularly under this government, and quite efficiently. So the idea of taxing the middle class, a lot of it comes from excise on fuel, collecting that money and then distributing it quite efficiently and quite without friction to the really poor. That's really been one of the successes of this government. That if you travel across the country, which I do often during elections, you find people are actually getting the benefits. Money is coming into their banks, they're getting the money to build their toilets or build additional rooms or expanding their homes. A lot of that stuff is happening. Jan Dhan, mudra, etc. That's happening. So that's been a kind of a shock absorber. In that complex process, our economy has moved on. Our economy has moved on, average of 6.5, 7. Could India have done better? I will just say that I've always believed that for Indian society, inclusive or not, that comes later. But any growth less than 7% average for Indian society is socially destabilizing. So I will leave it there, and I will then get started with our participants. Shall we start right to left, or? Okay, Amitabh, you set this in place. You set this in place, and you tell us what are the key policy reforms that have driven this growth, because there is growth. There was 2 years of stall, say 18 and 19, right? And then there was a COVID year. But if you take an average over 10 years, there's been robust growth on top of robust growth. So you get the benefit of compounding as well. So what are the policies or reforms that have really worked well, and what is the way ahead?
So Shekhar, first of all, the country has seen a lot of structural reforms, starting from GST, insolvency, bankruptcy code. You've had RERA. You've had a huge focus on ease of doing business. You've also brought down the corporate tax to a very moderate level, which is amongst the best in the world. The government gave away about 1,45,000 crores actually 3 years back. So a huge amount of structural reforms. But I think the big ticket reform which the government carried out has been in terms of the extent of digitization of the Indian economy. Every Indian has an Aadhaar. Then between 2015 to 2017, we have opened 550 million bank accounts. We linked them up with both Aadhaar and mobile numbers, which enabled us to do fast payments. And we do today about close to 50% of the fast payments in the world. China is next with just about 25%. And then from fast payment, you had a number of startups which started giving credit. Then you have a number of startups which took stock market to tier 2, tier 3 rural areas. And then you have today insurance on the mobile, on the go. GoDigit and Acco all give insurance. So digitization was the second thing. And the third thing, big ticket thing that has happened in India is huge focus on infrastructure, building 40 million houses, providing 130 million toilets, 253 million piped water connection, and making 88,000 kilometers of roads. So that has been the third big thing. And the fourth, I think, is this huge push actually, which India, we haven't taken so much credit of, but I think India is really driven green transformation. 250, close to about 200 gigawatt of renewable energy. We're the only G20 country which has, achieved the COP21, the Paris target 9 years ahead of schedule. Now we import about 160 billion worth of fossil fuel. Our target is that we'll produce green hydrogen and actually become an exporter of clean energy. So all this has driven growth. We've grown at 8.2%. The challenge is now to really grow to a $30 trillion economy by 2030. But my belief is it's not the size of the economy which is important, it's the per capita income which is important. We are at about $2,500 plus. We need to take that to 18,000 plus. And 18,000 plus means that your per capita income, your GDP will have to grow at 9 times by 2030, by 2047, 9 times, but your per capita income has to grow by 8 times to reach 18,000 plus to be able to lift every single individual above the poverty line. And that would require a huge focus on about 50% of the population. India grows on 10% of the population, another 30% drive demand from that 10%, but 50% of the population, 46% is dependent on agriculture. So 50% of the population in India lives on welfare schemes, agriculture sector. They live on poorly paid jobs. And Because of that, our learning outcomes are poor, our health outcomes have to improve, our nutritional standards have to improve. All that is really critical so that these 50% from being passive beneficiaries of government schemes become active drivers of Indian economy and India's growth story to reach a per capita income of 18,000. That is the real transformation which India has to carry out.
That's a good point. I think to the list of reforms that have worked, I would also add the cleaning up of bank balance sheets, the nationalized bank balance sheets, because that was weighing the economy down a great deal. Now, those banks are struggling for credit. That's a different issue. I would presume that some of that comes up in other sessions. Dr. Sharma, since he put the burden of all of India's growth and making the growth more even or less uneven than it is on the digital infrastructure. Tell us the story a little bit, and how does it matter, and what is the way ahead?
Well, thank you, Mr. Gupta, for setting the tone, and I think Amitabh has very clearly covered almost all the sectors and where we need to go ahead. I limit myself only to digital infrastructure and what is become a very common term, DPI, the digital public infrastructure. So I think the story, in a sense, has been going on since last about 30 to 40 years. We have been all doing e-governance and stuff like that. But the real story, started accelerating when we started Aadhaar in 2009. That was a large project which India undertook. And of course, that project, as you know, everybody was condemning that project. I don't think any project has been demonized as much as Aadhaar has been demonized in this country. However, and everybody was saying it's a failure, it doesn't work, it's not going to work, but somehow we pulled it off. And today, every Indian has a digital identity. 140 crore people have that identity. That actually showed us a path to a digital, sort of roadmap for this country. So, for example, Aadhaar taught us the meaning of scalability. 1.4 billion is 1/6 of humanity. So how do you scale things? How do you make it speedy? How do you make it interoperable? And India is a very large country and diverse country, and how do you make it inclusive? How do you make it, open source, open standard based? How do you make minimalism? How do you ensure security and privacy? So all these, attributes which actually Aadhaar taught us. And today I think Aadhaar is at the center of India's public service delivery system. That's one part. Then we started and came, 2014, and the Prime Minister gave a call for Digital India. And Digital India, when at that time, we had just 37%, tele-density. One of the attributes of Digital India was digital connectivity, connectivity as an infrastructure. And in 2015, the number of telephones and all that, mobile phones, etc., was very low. Today we have a tele-density of 93%. Today we have 1.18 billion mobile connections. Most importantly, at 2015, the data rate was 275 rupees per gigabyte. Today that data rate is, how much? 7 rupees per gigabyte. 7 rupees as against 275. Indians are consuming the highest amount of data, 20 gigabytes per capita per month. They are actually making video calls. Every laborer, all our laborers from Bihar and Jharkhand, in the evening they talk to their families on a video call. So that digital infrastructure actually accelerated this whole issue of digital connectivity and software and services, citizens empowerment. And that trick of, how do you create such large scale systems, that taught us. And then, we had UPI in 2016, Unified Payment Interface, I think something which is nowhere in the world. Today I can transfer 1 rupee to you and you will get exactly 1 rupee, not even 99 paisa. That's the way. And we are doing 13 billion transactions per month on UPI now. So that's the
Well,
huge.
If I may interrupt you,
Yeah.
all that's been done already. I mean, what can you build on top of it now
Exactly.
going ahead?
This is
to
what I'm-
sustain this growth? See, the other thing is that while we say, I mean, maybe it's a little out of the syllabus, but while we say the data has become so cheap,
Right.
data is free data is also the new opiate.
Sure.
I mean, I drive around the country during elections. I find village after village, small town after small town, even in an industrialized state like Gujarat, young people just hanging out on the road someplace, with the motorbikes parked. They are not even having a conversation. They are all watching some crap on their phones because it's free. Even your people, you say security guards and others, they are not even doing their jobs. They're just watching data for free. And if you see what they are watching, I am a trained reporter, so I am trained to eavesdrop, right? If I'm sitting across the table from you, and if you have a document looking your way, I can read it better from the other side. Then I can read it from the right side because I'm a reporter. So I know what they're watching. They are not watching any edutech. They are not trying to upgrade their skills. They are not even watching any Ramayana, Mahabharata. They are watching stuff which any government, particularly a conservative government like this, would like to banish from Bharatvarsh. But so this free data can also be a curse. It can be an enabler. So it's great to say, fantastic, free data, everybody has it. But what's it good for except to help people pass time? And all kinds of faltu leagues have come up of all kinds with a lot of betting. So tell us, what do you build on this now that we have it?
Thank you very much. But let me make one point. Technology is not the moral, or immoral. Technology is an enabler. It can also be used. This can be misused.
So how do we use it more constructively?
Right. I'm just telling you what has been the digital story of this country. And this country has learned to build large-scale platforms. We are now building the open network for digital commerce. We built CoWIN in these difficult times of COVID. CoWIN has now 2.4 billion vaccination records. I don't think any country in the world has built that kind of infrastructure. We are now building the Ayushman Bharat digital mission. We are building a number of products which are not platform-centric, which are network-centric. We have told the world that digital public infrastructure was, Amitabh is there as the Sherpa of D20. DPI is one of the major focus of our leadership in the digital world. So what is happening is, I am not going into the question as to how digital technologies can be used or misused. Today you have AI, you have machine learning, you have deep learning, you have all kinds of technologies. In terms of technologies, India has certainly leapfrogged. And we have built a number of products on these technologies. The digital banking, today India has got 82% people have bank accounts. Janadhan, Aadhaar and mobile, the JAM Trinity has been able to do 45 billions of US dollars of worth of DBT to the people. In COVID times, we were able to do that. What I'm saying is, we have now been able to prove to the world that what we are capable of doing and what we are capable of building this kind of infrastructure, and this will continue. Believe me, the kind of ecosystem, startup ecosystem. I teach at IIT Kanpur, and I see many startups and many boys and girls, they are creating such wonderful solutions. So today, India has got that confidence. We have that, kind of infrastructure on which we can build solutions. And I think this is a great thing which is happening for the country. And I think what is important, which you pointed out in the beginning, is essentially inclusivity. The inclusion must happen. This whole technology must be used for skill development, for example. It can be used. Many of the simulations, many of the other things. So essentially, it's a question of how do you ensure that technology is put to right use. And that is a question which is not a question to be sort of done by technology alone. It is a question of large, overall awareness, overall, sort of building these policies. That's what it is. But I see a digital future of this country, I think is exceptionally, great going forward. Thank you.
See, you might have done some match fixing with me to be the last in the group, but your turn had to come, so it's there. Now, some key questions. You've also looked at labor, and there are issues about employment. And once again, let's look ahead. Let's look ahead much more than what's been achieved. How do we crack the employment issue? I mean, there is the whole ease of doing business idea. There are incentives, PLI, manufacturing versus services. For growth to sustain, society has to have a modicum of stability. For that, we need more employment.
Thank you. And so I'm going to talk about the supply side, since both the earlier speakers have spoken about the macro picture. But before that, let me answer a question you asked Mr. Sharma about what ahead with the digital. So ILO brings out a report every 2 or 3 years where they map every country's social security. What's the coverage? And so far, they had been showing that India's only 24% of our population is covered under any social security scheme, which is not true, right? We all know it's not true. But their criteria is it has to be cash, it has to be continuous, and it has to be through a ordinance or a government statutory. So the digital interface, the DBT, the Aadhaar, helped us to do the mapping, and we identified that there were 168 crore people covered under only 34 social security schemes. We didn't even take the states, we didn't take all central government schemes, just 34. So that is more than India's population. Then when we did because Aadhaar was there, DBT was there, we were able to do a mapping. And we have given to ILO now, person-wise, we can identify 65% of our population. And I'm not talking of the ration card holders, which is the largest. 65% of our population is covered under one social security scheme or the other. We could do this and show to ILO because these digital platforms were available to us. So that was the question I wanted to answer. But on what you asked me, today's newspaper, since you are a newspaper person, today's newspaper had a very interesting...
Depends on which one.
We are agnostic to newspapers. So today's newspaper had a very interesting story on how girls in rural areas, earlier 4.5% girls used to ride a bicycle to school, now it is 11%. So this is good, it's also bad. When we are talking of Viksit and inclusive, good development, but not enough. Similarly, when I was looking at the PLFS data, intergenerational mobility. So in 2004, if somebody was a casual worker, their son was 80% likely to be 80% of their sons would be casual workers. 2018, that came down to 50%. Good. But for SC/ST, 75%. So when we are talking Viksit, the inclusivity part of it is even more critical. And that is why we need to look at these trends and these patterns. And a very striking thing about inclusivity, and I have to address the elephant in the room, is women's employment. When we are talking of employment, what is it that will lead people to the appropriate jobs? One is their mobility. The other is the agility of the job market, which means that people know what jobs are available, where they are available, whether they are appropriate for those jobs, whether those jobs are appropriate for them. Where are those mechanisms? We have skilling. But recently, there was a survey that found nearly 50% of people who had applied were, companies are not able to find the right kind of people. So there is this mismatch in the labor market, which I would say is the agility issue. The other is the mobility issue. Last year, the Nobel Prize was won by Claudia Gordon, and she did a very important work. She showed that as on a graph, as the country's incomes go up, women's employment follows a U-shaped curve, right? So as the incomes will go up, more and more women will enter the workforce. And a similar thing happens in the households. As the incomes go up, initially very low incomes, more women, then incomes go up, women's employment comes down, and then again it goes up. In India, as usual, we buck the trend. In urban areas, we are seeing this. So in urban areas, we are on the cusp. This is the time in urban areas to push for it and make sure that 50% of our workforce is not left behind, comes into the workforce. But in rural areas, we find that the line is just going like that. Even with rising incomes, women are not entering the workforce. And there could be numerous reasons for it. One, in India, there are particular reasons. This PLFS data also did something on mother-in-laws. If mother-in-laws are present in the house and working, more probability of women working, etc., etc. So these societal things are what lead to the stickiness of mobility. I refer to the cycles. We also find that in terms of transport, if women are going for work, they walk up to 10 kilometers. Beyond that, they need public transport. In case of men, they walk up to 2 kilometers. 2 to 30 kilometers, they have bicycles and motorcycles. 30 kilometers and above, they use the public transport. So for whom is public transport more critical? The jobs are not right next to the home, right? So for whom is this more critical? Who needs to have greater access? It is about the desire. You ask women and they will say, you ask them, they were asked, why are you not in the workforce? And they will say, it's because I have child rearing, etc. You ask men why you're not in the workforce, it's mostly due to higher studies. So with this, what is it that we need to do, right? Skilling, of course, is a very obvious answer. The right skills, the ability to map, to understand. And I'm very happy to see that a lot of industries have set up this. One is, of course, the apprenticeship program of the government. You now have the employment-linked incentive instead of the production-linked incentives. A lot of industries like chemical, petrochemical, I know, they have set up their own training centers and they take people. So that's a good mix of the public and private enterprise. And then for women, we know what needs to be done. I do not need to reiterate. But I would just like to point out there are certain people who seek employment, who work, who are totally on the margins, whom we need to pay special attention to. And I mean the young girls who travel alone through agencies to work in urban areas, in households. Who's even looking at them? People who work in brick kilns, all the migrants who live in sheds, etc. So there are certain vulnerable categories that need special attention, irrespective of man, woman, which would then enable a true inclusivity, I think. And on the global thing, we all know that there is need for care workers. We know for Germany, for example, they stopped public transport. They don't have enough drivers, conductors. So Sir was leading the G20, and as part of our employment track, we have asked ILO to do a mapping so that every country knows where are the jobs available, what are my skills, let me train my people in that. And then, of course, it's all about politics and visas. But at least that snapshot will be available. That is something that is available globally, and that's something that's easily done within the country as well.
That's a good point, because I find that in states where a lot of women are employed by industry, say Tamil Nadu. I think Tamil Nadu employs 43% of all of the women working in factories in India. Just one state does that. And the phenomenon you find there is that most people who run large factories also run transport. So the Krishnagiri area, you have the leather business, you have Ola. Each one employs tens of thousands of young women, but you can the buses fetch them from their villages, drop them back. there is childcare facilities and food, etc. So that's very important. Now, there's a larger question of demographic dividend. All of us have talked about it. It looks, however, like, we don't have the 2021 census or equivalent, but from all the data that's coming out, it looks like that we begun to age now. Our birth rates have declined, and they are declining further. And no country where birth rates have declined, none, has ever been able to turn them around, because that's the way society evolves. Chinese have failed with incentives and force. Russians have failed with incentive, force, and vodka. All the Europeans are failing, so aging societies is a problem. So there is a real danger of missing this demographic dividend. So if each one of you can just take 2 minutes giving your solutions, just solutions, and let me start left to right.
No, I think it's a serious problem, and the first intervention which you did about the young boys and girls watching all kinds of nonsensical stuff on the thing. Why is it happening? It's happening because probably they're unemployed. The guys have nothing to do. So अपना बैठ के वही देखता रहता है. And the job which is everybody is ready to do is a security guard. Because security guard mein you don't have to do anything. You can just sit there and watch the whole thing. So that's really what is required, is that if we want to sort of change this demographic dividend to a positive part, we need to ensure, again, skilling, training, appropriate job mapping, as Arti was saying. So this is something which we need to do, and I think the time is really running out for us, because otherwise what you see in Saraswati Pujas in the villages, and I come from a small village in UP, I find कि सब लोग शराब पी करके अपना नाचते रहते हैं, and they are all faltus, they have nothing to do. So actually it's a very serious problem which is happening, and the agriculture is not able to obviously absorb all this workforce. And what we need is actually manufacturing. For example, electronics manufacturing could have provided a very significant part in the women employment, all these units. That, I think, these are some of the areas where we have to focus on industries, productions, which can provide large-scale employment, besides agriculture. Maybe agriculture also has got to be made more productive in terms of not really growing only rice and gehu, but maybe something else and other areas. So I think that's a serious challenge which we need to focus on.
That's a good point, Amitabh. But before I come to you, I didn't particularly mean that what these young people are watching is nonsensical. I think what is nonsensical is that they have nothing else to do. Because I find them, and these are things that I've written about. I found it in Gujarat. I write a series called Writings on the Wall when I travel through parts of India going through election campaigns, and I found it was the same thing. In every village square, there'd be 10, 12 motorbikes, young boys standing there, and they're not even doing teen patti or rummy. They're just watching, and in Amritsar, I've seen women in kitty party sitting in a restaurant, 10, 12 of them, nicely turned out. They've taken the trouble of getting their hair blow dried and etc., because they're going to a kiddie party, but they're just watching free data, because data is free. So it's become a grand distraction, which may be a good thing, because if the grand distraction is not there, you could have this manifest in other ways. So I don't judge what they are watching. This is also playing out an aspiration in some ways. Everybody thinks they can be Instagram stars now. So the whole country is making reels. The same security guards you're talking about, I just did a straw poll. Every security guard in our colony and every member of their family makes reels, right? And they mostly come from Bihar, Eastern UP, and Bundelkhand. Everybody is making reels, right? I'm the only one among all these neighborhood that I know who doesn't know how to make reels yet, right? but everybody is making reels. So it's not I will not judge it. So I just thought, I just said that, since there is a lot of conservatism in the establishment, they may not approve of it, but it suits everybody that people are busy. So that said, Amitabh, how do you translate this demographic? How do you encash these demographic dividends? Because we are now in the danger of losing it.
So Shekhar, we are a young nation. We average age is 29, and even in 2047, we'll be relatively there. But we've got this window of about 2 decades. My view is that India needs to focus on its most populous states: UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. You need to transform learning outcomes, health outcomes, and nutritional standards in these states. Because for India to grow on a sustained basis into a $30 trillion economy, $30 trillion economy is our ambition. That means that in 2047, you will be the 2nd largest economy in the world. You would have overtaken USA then. And that means that you need investments. Investment means savings. Savings will not come without jobs. Jobs will not come without learning outcomes. Learning outcomes requires health outcomes. It requires huge focus on nutritional standard. If you go by present analysis, almost 25% of India will remain stunted in 2047. Almost 30% of India, and I'm talking about ASA studies, I'm talking about NAS studies. 30% of India, you will have 10th class student who will not be able to read class 2, his mother tongue. And these are challenges not of money. These are challenges of failure of focusing on outcomes. These are failures of governance capacities and failure to deliver on ground. And these challenges are a challenge of the state governments. And therefore, state governance capacity and our focus to move away from physical and financial achievements to achieving outcomes on learning, and to track every single pregnant person, every single pregnant woman from the point of her pregnancy to the point of her delivery, because we've ended up with a virtuous cycle of malnutrition. A weak mother is giving birth to a weak child who's ending up being stunted or wasted, and therefore you have to really work on every single pregnant woman in these rural estates of India. And that will be the transformation. The transformation has to be on improving nutritional standards, learning outcomes, health outcomes in these 6 or 7 states, which are your most populous states, and transform governance there. It's the capacity to transform governance. It's not about money at all. It's not about resources. People say you give more money. No, it's not about money. It's about focusing on outcomes and transforming capacity to deliver. And it's a failure of governance in these states.
Well, interesting point. Also, these are the states which, we tend to be very critical of these states. But the fact is that these are the states which are still preventing India from aging much faster than it would, because those are the states that produce the babies. The birth rates in Bihar are twice as much as the birth rate, exactly twice as much as the birth rates in Punjab, for example, 1.6 and 3.3. So Punjab, in fact, is even lower than Kerala at this point. The only data available to us is NFHS 5 and Pew and stuff like that, because there's an issue that I'll come to in conclusion. Ahuja, same question. How do you make sure we don't lose this demographic dividend?
So sir has answered, I would have said the same thing, so he's taken words out of my mouth. But when we are talking of demographic dividend, so let's say we are looking at a person, the average 29-year-old today, right? What are that person's aspirations and what are that person's capabilities? There is a huge mismatch between that sense of entitlement and the reality. And that is where the real problem lies. And that, I mean, just very cold terms, the demand and supply mismatch in a way. What is needed is not there. And that is because over the years, the quality of people coming out of the educational system has not been adequate to meet the demands of the job market. This 29-year-old probably already has a child or two. So those children we need to invest in the right manner. As sir said, there's no dearth of money. It's about prioritizing the needs, focusing on them and doing them well. So one is meeting the aspirations of this person, and we know the answers, the skilling, the matching, etc. Why do so many people go for gig work? Why do so many people become security guards? Why do so many young girls from villages go and become household help elsewhere? There is an aspiration, right? So, and there is a lack of, they can't do anything else. So that is something we need to tap into for the current generation and for the coming generation, of course, that. But what about the people getting older? Western societies are even worse than us in terms of the demographic dividend. We are lucky that we have 2 or 3 decades where we can tap into that. But the older generation also, there is a huge caregiving need, and it's all the informal economy currently. You have numerous agencies that supply people to households. So that is again something that is going ahead, something that we can capitalize on very, very well.
Question, we are coming towards the conclusion of this, so each one of you will have 2 minutes. But before that, my question, do we have enough data to address these things, or are we using old data? And have we seen over time a closing off of the data tap? And I particularly refer to the 2021 census not having been held. And no plan is seen on the horizon either, because you can't suddenly notify a census 2 weeks from now. So I've seen in the past couple of years a humongous Jangarna Bhavan come up in Delhi. It's right across Taj Hotel at Mansingh. You should check it. I don't know what people do there. It was inaugurated by some pomp and show, I think, a couple of years back. But in the absence of data, you can go to ILO, you can go to UNDP, you can go to UNFPA, you can go to Pew, there is NFHS 5, but this drying of data, you have a demographic challenge involving at least 50-60 crore young people at a time when even the economic survey this year has told us that only 50, it's an improvement. There are only 51% of people coming out of college in India are employable by Indian industry. So what the rest are watching free data. In fact, the data becomes more expensive, you will have social unrest. Seriously. So just half a minute for each one. Do you have enough data? Do we have enough data, Mr. Dr. Sharma?
I think what, of course, we could not do the census of 2021, but 2011 census and basically extrapolation, all these things are being done. So
no, that's a bit dangerous.
It is dangerous, but then, in absence of that kind of data, the only way left for us is to do extrapolation, number one. Number two, you have various surveys taking place, at various points in time, the usual NFS and other things. I think these are the ones which can provide the source of data, number one. Number two, again, digital, this kind of DBT and many other areas, you have the numbers are there, the individuals are identified, the educational levels also need to be, there are in school data, other kinds of data is there. So therefore, you have the data. I mean, obviously, you don't have that kind of exhaustive data or data with lot of these attributes. For example, in 2011, you have these, that SECC, Socioeconomic Caste Census, which had huge, very rich data, and that data became the basis for many of our programs. So we do not have that, unfortunately, but I think we have to make do with what we have and then, basically make our best guesstimates.
Let me turn to you and then to Amitabh.
Okay. So if you look at census, that's 10 years. In terms of employment, what you need is agility, as I mentioned. So you need to have data on your fingertips. If not real time, then at least frequent enough. You need to know in which sectors jobs are being created, where there's a dearth of people, etc. So for that, we have data. We have PLFS that comes quarterly. We had the recent report on the state of jobs. Plus, we have the e-Shram with 30 crore informal workers registered on that. So there is data available on the fingertips for people to work around, for policymakers and for industry to see where what is happening, right? So in that sense, I would say yes, the data for employment is adequate.
Amitabh, and what's the issue with census? Why is it such a challenge?
First of all, let me say that I'm a great believer in data, and I believe that you can transform governance if you can get data on a real-time basis. And I'm a believer in data on a real-time basis. And I'm saying this because when I was a young collector, I worked very hard on several areas. I never came to know whether my district had improved or gone back till data used to come through the Department of Statistics 5 to 6 years later, and then you'll discover after you've left the district. But I ran the aspirational district program, and I ran it the most backward of the 112 districts of India. I trained the officers in all these districts to provide me real-time data on a minute-to-minute basis. And we were coming out with ranking of these districts. Every minute they could see it on the portal, but every month we would announce the performance in public domain, which district has gone up and which district has gone down in which outcomes. Whether they'd moved up on health, whether they'd moved down on education or on nutrition in all these 112 districts, and we created a huge sense of competition. And the collector of Kifre came to me saying that I'm coming third, but by the time she had left her district in Nagaland, came to me, her district had moved from third to 7th position. And she said, I'll go back and work harder. 7 days were left. She worked very hard, but she could only move from 7th to the 4th position. So minute to minute, you have to tell people that whether you're going up or down, you can crack that on a real-time basis. And that is what you need to do if you want to improve learning outcomes. You know, technology has enabled you to do this on a real-time basis, and that is the only way you can make a technological leapfrogging in many of these slow-moving indicators. These are very slow-moving indicators. Learning outcome is very slow-moving. But if you keep doing outcome tests on a monthly basis using technology and using the power of artificial intelligence, you can transform India very quickly. And I'm a great believer in real-time data to be able to do this and putting it out in public domain and actually naming and shaming people. We did this with ease of doing business. First year we did this, Gujarat came number 1. Next year, Andhra beat Gujarat. Third year, Telangana beat both Gujarat and Andhra. But the good thing was that competition had led to Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, which were 24th and 25th, coming 4th and 5th. So that is the power of data.
Well, that said, we have about 3 minutes left, and also my Apple Watch, which was one of the worst purchases I made, but my colleagues talked me into it. It's telling me it's time to stand up, right? So stand up India, as the Prime Minister says. So we'll take a 3-minute break from this. So each one of you has a minute to wind up. Why don't I start with you? You were last to begin, but you wind up. Give us your closing thoughts, but 1 minute each.
Okay, so this is the elevator pitch. My elevator pitch, winding up, is that moving ahead. Inclusivity has to become our mantra. Inclusivity not just for women, but for other people. There are a lot of persons with disabilities, for example, who are not in the job market at all, who are able to work. So inclusivity has to become the focus. Agility, using data to ensure, as Sir said, real-time data to ensure correct matching of skills with jobs. And of course, tapping into the aspirations of the young people in the right manner.
So I truly believe that this is not merely India's decade, this is India's century. And it's for us to really transform India in in a range of social indicators, which will then lead to sustained growth over the next 3 to 4 decades.
Well, my 2 bits is that I believe that technology is a great enabler for all kinds of reforms, measuring the outcomes or other kinds of data, or even learning, skilling. And I think even now, while we have had about 15 years and 2 decades of technology undergirding almost every aspect of governance, I think even now there is a huge scope of improvement and leveraging technology. For example, I will just give you one example, and I wrote about it a couple of days back. We have the electronic KYC. Now, every SEBI or every bank or everybody does, separate silos they are having. So there is a huge scope for breaking those silos. There is a huge scope for using and permeating technology in almost all programs of the government, governance, people, and that I think is the way forward. I mean, I understand that it will require much more than technology. Technology is merely a tool to enable that, but I think it's a very, very important tool.
Well, thank you very much. It says time's up, and I think, thank you panelists for keeping the time. On what you said on KYC, I will just mention one thing in the passing. I'm not your regular guy, so I will always say something out of the agenda. This KYC business, we are a very interesting country. We love bureaucracy. The Janata loves bureaucracy. The private sector loves bureaucracy because everybody thinks that I get power and legitimacy from being bureaucratic. Now, you say e-KYC. Do we realize how much time we spend in our normal lives just doing KYC? I think in my working life, do about 3 KYCs every week, right? Every time I sign a check for the company, just a regular transfer, RTGS क्या बोलते हैं आप, उसके साथ में I have to have a photocopy of my Aadhaar card both sides, my PAN card both sides. I have to attest them, right? If I have to withdraw money from my own account with my check, if I've used a certain number of checks, I have to do a KYC on both sides of Aadhaar card and both sides of PAN. So I want to see someday all these banks and all these institutions, their godowns, where all these millions of sheets of paper in duplicates are sitting there, right? I don't think it's of any use to anybody.
So that's precisely what I was saying, that we need to reform. We are not reforming. We are, from digital to physical we are going. It's very sad. We don't need this.
But
and you have to do re-KYC for bank accounts.
But it is the finance ministry's instruction to banks, right? Now every bank account is linked to Aadhaar and PAN card already, right? So after that, every bank account is linked to Aadhaar and PAN card. First of all, you go through that. Then for every document, so I don't think our people also feel secure until they've seen hard copy, ideally in triplicate, and with attestation, self-attested only for buying an air ticket, right? Self-attested only for this. I think, ease of doing business is a very high objective. I'm sorry, I'm stealing half a minute, but ease of living is a more important objective. Sorry, I stole that minute, but if you get a moment to speak, you should. So thank you very much, and thank you, panelists. You were most disciplined panelists, because I've seen in this hall one panelist take the time of everybody else, and unless you call the riot police, which you can't, we know some of those. And then people also get cross with you later, saying you never gave me enough time. But that was all the time we had. So these are three wonderful panelists who made great points, and you've been a great audience. Early morning. I'm not a morning person. There's another friend of mine. Most of my friends and we exchange notes between 1 and 2 a.m. And we have a view amongst ourselves that there's a wrong allegation that we don't start our day in time. We work 9 to 9, but we work London time, we say. So I know how tough it is to be there in a morning session. Thank you very much. All of you have been very, very, and I know none of you has been sleeping, because as anybody who's often on this side, I can spot a sleeper in 1 second. It's like my mom would, if she was looking at dal or rice on her thali, she would pick up the little bit of pebble or something first. She will see that first. So I can also see a sleeper immediately. So thank you very much. You've been brilliant, and you've been served good coffee, it seems.
Thank you very much for a rousing discussion and for setting a very brisk pace, I think, to Charcha. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. We will begin our next session in 10 minutes, and we will take a break in between. I apologize because we began a little late, and we are trying to course correct. We are unable to take questions in this session, but the same QR code will appear in the following sessions. Request you to use it to ask questions. We also have other sessions beginning in the theater, which is the hall below this one, and Silver Oak, which is in the block on the opposite side of the Stein Auditorium. Look forward to seeing you here in 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you to the panel.